What is up, guys? It's Mason once again, and today the star of our show is Deborah Quickpen, the 12-year-old Nigerian chess prodigy who made a showing at the 2024 Chess Olympiad. She represented her country on board 4, and according to chessresults.com, of the 11 games she played, she only lost 1, which is a very, very impressive showing. So if you like this kind of content, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know who you would want me to cover. Now, the top players are already being covered. So anyone in Africa that you want me to cover, I would love to do that. After this, the 2 people on my list are Fee Rakotomaharo, I think that's how his name is pronounced, and Jesse February. Because why not? I just want to tag her in a video. So without much ado, let's get straight into the analysis of these games. So the first game is Deborah versus Abdul Rahman Ali. And she starts with c4, the English. We have e6, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, d5, knight f3, bishop to d6, castles, and then d4. So it's sort of looking like a Queen's Gambit declined. Maybe, okay, after this you could call it a Slav. We have knight to c3, knight b to d7, queen to c2, and then rook to e8. So in these types of structures I've mentioned, this sort of looks like a collie or a landing with a bad bishop. Ideally you want to go for ideas of e5, e4 as black, and there are times, okay, white could go for the same idea, or white could go for sort of like a queenside expansion. So when you look at this position, black has a lot of pieces guarding the e5 square. So I was kind of expecting, I mean, this is not an optimal move, but I was kind of like expecting bishop to f4 to kind of prevent the pawn push. But she plays here rook to d1. And I'm guessing she's just following the mantra that we spoke about, that whenever the rook is on the same file as a queen, regardless of how many pieces are in between, you want to let that queen flee, right? So maybe she was doing this so that if her opponent tries to open up the position, there are lines in which this queen would be hanging, right? So I thought that was the reason why she did that. So I was expecting the opponent to continue with the plan of e5, but we get the move bishop to b4, which seemed kind of strange. I can't really tell what black was afraid of, because if you're afraid of e4, you are able to stop e4 before it even happens, right, with your e5 push. So this move didn't really make much sense to me. But then we have knight to d2, knight to f8, e4, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, f5, knight to g5, bishop to e7, and then knight to f3. And when you observe this position, it's quite obvious that white is better, or white is a much more preferred player to, or the preferred person you want to play as in this position. Why? The pieces of white look more developed and more active. Whereas when you compare it to black's pieces, this bishop is very bad and stuck behind the pawns. This knight here is kind of passive for the meantime, and this rook is for the meantime just locked. So it's very difficult for black to really push a plan. Black has to now coordinate his pieces. And with these kind of pawn structures like the Scandinavian and then the Caro-Kann, this is the perfect way to combat them. So already black is very preferred. And I like this way she played. And in the next moves, bishop to f6, bishop to e3, queen to c7, bishop to f4, queen e7, and then c5, you can see she has very good positional understanding, because this just locks out her only active piece, right? So now the bishop can't really make any reasonable moves or any useful moves at this point in time. So here white controls all the play. To continue, we have knight to g6. You do not want to trade the bishops. Queen goes back, h4, knight to e7, b4, now beginning a queenside assault, knight to d4, rook a to b1, bishop to d7, a4. All these moves are kind of in a way trying to prevent this or looking over this. We have queen to c8, bishop to e5, and here I think she wanted to trade, because looking at color square pawns, the color square of the pawns, this should be her bad bishop and this should be her opponent's good bishop. And I think more or less the main idea is that if the trade occurs, this knight is very good in this position. Forgive the lag of my PC. So her opponent declines the trade rightfully, and then she goes knight to d2. B5, A takes b5, she takes b5, and here she plays a nice move here. Bishop takes d5. And after e takes d5, you look at the pawn structure and you're like, okay, this is very nice for white. This bishop still can't come out, and at the same time they are targets. Yes, you could argue that you could play these moves to hold on to these pawns in particular, but then you continue to weaken your dark squares and create weaknesses around your king, right, or around your queen side. And there are moves like knight here with the ideas of pawn push, I believe. And this pawn is basically a weakness and a target for white. So we have knight to b3, f4, queen to a2, f3. And here, Deborah makes a very mature sequence of moves, I would say. Because, I mean, let's just look at this, right? She starts by playing knight to d2, attacking this and at the same time opening up the attack here. Of course, taking here doesn't really give you any much of an advantage. So her opponent rightfully defends the pawn, the f pawn. And she's like, okay, rook to b3, adding another attacker to the pawn. Her opponent is like, okay, I can keep defending it. And you'd say, okay, maybe if this is her plan, then you'd expect something like queen a3, putting more pressure on this pawn. But then that adds the queen into the defense. But that wasn't her plan all along. In this position, she just goes rook to a3. And it's like her opponent was focused on the wrong thing. And the question is like, what else would you do here? It's like you have no choice but to focus on what she was doing. And that ends up giving you a very bad position, right? Very mature, playing on both sides of the board. Very nice. We have queen to e6, rook a6, queen d7. We have a bit of trades here, and after rook to e7, white is in a very good position. Why? Because once this queen moves, we have queen takes d5 with a check, forking the two rooks. After the king moves, you take the rook, you force the trade of the queens, and when you look at the position, yes, your opponent also has chances of making a pass pawn, but your pawns are much more deadly and more likely to promote as compared to your opponent. So with just a few more moves, after d7, Deborah won the game. Her opponent resigned, and she won because I mean you can't win the rook here. This happens. I mean, there's nothing you can do here. And if you take here, there's always this, right? There's literally nothing you can do here. So very nice game by Deborah. Let's jump on to her second game as white. And in this specific game, I'm going to touch on something concerning transpositional learning, right? Understanding positions and the ideas that come out of them. So we have c4, d6, g3, standard thing that she played the last time. And here we have bishop to f5, which is slightly different from what her opponent played. Actually, not so much slightly. But in the other game, her opponent bishop was stuck here behind the pawns. And here she goes queen to b3. And the point I want to raise here is, let's look at the London system, which is my favorite opening. Don't leave the video. d4, d5. Bishop f4, and if your opponent copies you with bishop to f5, there are many things you can play here, but a very nice idea here is to go c4. After c4, you have c6, knight to c3. If your opponent goes e6, then you go queen to b3. And the point is, after your opponent tries to face you off, you play this very crucial move c5. And the way I think about this position is, whoever initiates the trade of queens is the one who is losing. So after queen takes, pawn takes, white is in a very nice position. And you have very simple ideas of b4, b5. You can leave this pawn to be backward, develop your knight, and create a pass pawn on the king side. I have a very good win record with this specific position. And you can check my game against Thompson in the Nationals on my channel. Yes, I did not play it well at the point. I had a very good middle game, but I messed up. I still managed to win the game though, but you can check out that game to understand this idea that I'm speaking about. So you get to see how interesting it is to transfer the ideas when looking at openings. So here she does the exact same thing. Queen b3, queen b6, c5. And after queen takes b3, pawn takes, a takes b3, g6. So similar ideas, but different ways in which the position is going. She goes bishop to f4, knight b to d7, and then knight b to d2, which was strange because, again, for me, because like I mentioned, in the position I studied, the knight goes into c3 and you push the pawn forward, right? Here it looks like she's plotting to push e4 at some point, and I don't know how good of a move that is. Knight to h4, you do not want to trade the bishop. Knight d to f6, we have b4, knight to e4, she rejects the trade of the knights. King comes in and then she hides her bishop behind this pawn. You can't take it, the rook is hanging. a6, knight to e5 check, king to e8, bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, and then we have f3. There was a very interesting line the engine recommended here with g6 f3. Very funny line, because I think you sacrifice here. If your opponent takes, you take the bishop, but if they take here, you have this move, and after takes, very funny stuff happen. Anyways, I don't think everybody will play that. But then we have these set of moves, and then we have the e4 strike. e4, we have e5, she plays d takes e5, f takes e5. You do not want to really like continue the captures here, because you give your opponent an asset or like a means of counter-attacking. So just because you can trade doesn't mean you should. Bishop to c7, putting pressure on this pawn. Bishop to g7, knight to a5, keeping a watch on these pawns. Any weakness can be easily attacked. We have bishop to c8, knight to d3, putting pressure on this guy. King attacks the bishop. We have takes, takes, takes. She's up a pawn. King comes back. King attacks the knight. Knight goes back. And after this trade, we enter into this endgame where Deborah is up a pawn. She has this passed pawn in the center, and she does something very interesting here. Or she does something very interesting that you'll notice, in that whenever she gets a small edge, she trades into a winning endgame, right? Here the position is kind of okay. Of course, the knight can't take because of the pin city that exists over here, right? So we have knight to e5, rook to d3, and she sees a very nice tactic. Knight takes c6, b takes c6, knight takes with check, king moves away, and you win the rook. So now she's up 2 pawns and an exchange. This is completely winning. She trades off the rooks, and after this, just a few moves here and advancing the pawn slowly. Eventually, she checkmates her opponent with the move rook to e8, securing another wonderful game. Very nice style by Deborah. Let's look at her last game. She played black, but there's only one reason. There's only one reason why I want us to look at this game, and once you see it, you laugh. Now, if this is theory, it spoils the whole show for me. But if it's not theory, I really love this game, and I'm sure you guys will love what happens here. e4, c5, knight f3, knight e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. We have the open Sicilian. g6, the dragon. Knight takes c6, b takes c6, queen to d4, and this is the only reason for which I decided I would use this game. There were other nice games and interesting games that she played, but this is the only reason why I picked this game. Knight f6, e5, knight h4, knight c3, knight g7, bishop d3, knight d6. This knight literally went on a walk. And that's what makes it funny. And what makes it even more funny is that the engine gives this a minus 0.2. It's like, what? This knight just literally went on a walk, and black's position is nowhere worse. You know, it was very funny. If this is theory, that spoils the whole fun for me. Queen to h4, bishop to g7, f4, d6, e takes, queen takes, king takes, and knight to e4. So of course, the king just blocks here. So here we have a middle game position, a queenless middle game position with equal number of pawns on both sides. But black has this idea of making this d pawn passed. Of course, if you can imagine, no piece on the board with this, takes, you have a passed d pawn. So that's the idea that black has, but it's not going to be easy to execute, especially with rooks and bishops looking around the position. The king will be very, very unsafe in such positions. So let's see how Deborah goes through this. We have c3, c5, again holding the dark squares, but not really in this position. It's just to open up the bishop. Bishop e3, bishop e7, castles, f5, kicking the knight back, rook to h to e8, king to f2. We have a5, I believe, holding this position. preventing ideas of b5 in lines where the rook comes in to try and pressure. We have rook a to d1, bishop to c6, knight jumps in, and this gives her the opportunity to play d5. So now the pawn is getting up the board, right? And it's going to be very dangerous because there are so many pieces that are trying to like hold the pawn's advance. We have knight to e5, knight takes f4, very nice tactic, winning a pawn. The bishop comes back, we have b3, and Deborah makes a very nice decision here. She goes a4, and if you take, you really weaken up this side of the board. And if you don't take and your opponent takes, you still weaken this side of the board. The rooks can also come in and cause problems for you. And if you avoid, which maybe is a better option, what happens is that this pawn is now actually passed, right? You don't have any other pawns that counteract it. But the good news for white here is that now the king has less of a shield, right? The king has less of a shield. So we have bishop takes b4, rook to b1, rook a to b8, rook f to c1, king to d7, and again, like I mentioned in the previous game, she's going to start looking for trades. She doubles the rooks and then forces a trade, in a sense. Rook takes b7. We have h4, rook to b4, bishop to f6, and again offers another trade. Why? The more the pieces leave the board, the safer her king is going to be in the center, right? With that single roof over its head, or whatever you would call that. Bishop takes, rook takes, king comes in, prevents rook b4, preventing the king from further advancing into the position. Bishop to g5, a3, rook to d2, d4, rook to d1, bishop to c5. We have more moves here. I just want to get to a position here. Her opponent offers a trade, which, I mean, should have been obvious that she's going to take. I think she thought she would get this and then pass her pawn, but then Deborah just goes take, rook takes, and then rook takes. Now, some of us would be here and be thinking, how can I maybe hold on to all my pawns? Of course, this pawn is gone, this one. But you might be thinking, how can I hold on to all my pawns? Deborah is like, no, I'm not going to hold on to all my pawns. You can have all those pawns for all I care. I will use those moves to activate my position. And now there's basically nothing you can do. It's either you sacrifice your rook and lose the game, or you keep your rook and eventually lose the game. We have d3, rook to c8, king to b3. Rook to a8, king to c2, rook c8 check. She makes a queen, captures the pawn, forks the king and the rook, and her opponent resigns the game. Very interesting game here by Deborah Quickpen. If that's not how they pronounce her name, I'll be so pissed. But yeah, if that's how they pronounce her name, I'm on the right track. But very nice game by her. I enjoy looking at these games. During the Olympiad streams, I wasn't really looking at her games, just once in a while, because I heard her name, I think, before or during the Olympiad, that she's a very young player and she's doing very well. And I decided to go and look on her games, and I was very impressed. It's good to see things like this happening in Africa. I'm speaking like though Egypt doesn't exist, but it's good that we are having these up and coming players who may possibly challenge the chess world in our stead, you know. We thought we would do it, but I don't think we can, you know. So it's good to see this. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'd like to hear from you which chess player you want me to cover next concerning the Olympiad, and yeah, that'll be very good to know. And before I forget, if you are a beginner in chess, let's say you've never learned how to play chess before, or you know just the basics, I do offer coaching services, so you can look in the description. My email is there. You can contact me and we can discuss the finances and then get you started on your journey in chess. Thank you guys once again for watching this video. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.